All right, let's give a big welcome to the breakdown to somebody that we had the pleasure of hanging out with this past summer at Heroes Con in Charlotte. Can't wait for folks to see the big full interview with our next guest. He's a veteran of the comics industry. I was going to say, between science fiction and Sergeant Rock and all the medieval stuff, you're the veteran of many wars too, through the world of comic books. The great Ron Randall is joining us all the way from his studios out on the West Coast. Ron, good to see you, buddy.
Thanks. Good to see you again too, Jeff.
Oh, man, what a fun time we had chatting with you this past summer. And, of course, we have mutual friends, the Sutherlands, Darren and Ruth, who I've known for a number of years. They're huge fans of yours. Such a great couple. They really reintroduced me to your work, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. I'd always known about your stuff. In fact, I still have the Conquerors of the Barren Earth miniseries from I don't know, what was that, like 1985, 86, something like that?
I think 84. Yeah.
84, even earlier.
Yeah. I mean, that's the Barren Earth. It started as a backup in Warlord, and then we got the miniseries. So anybody that comes up to me at a show or whatever and mentions the Barren Earth, that's like delivering the secret handshake, because I mean, then they really know my work if they can reference the Barren Earth stuff. So well done.
That's true. It's very obscure. But I also was a big fan of Trekker at Dark Horse. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, Dark Horse Comics was kind of the go-to for really cool stuff. They were picking up a lot of movie franchises. They're getting Aliens and Terminator and all of those great things. Frank Miller brought Sin City over there. There were lots of cool books happening, and I remember Trekker being one of the ones that I enjoyed the most when it first started up. You remember what year that was that you debuted Trekker?
Vividly. I was approached by Dark Horse to talk about it in the summer of '85. That was the summer that I moved back home to Portland from my time on the East Coast. I'd gone to the Cubit School in New Jersey, and so I remember those years very well. And it was that summer that Dark Horse was just ramping up. So I basically developed Trekker in '86, and the first issue came out cover dated '87, but I think the earliest Dark Horse Presents stories probably appeared in late '86. So it's right in that time period there.
Oh, wow. Okay. And it was black and white when it started, right?
Yeah, the entire Dark Horse line was black and white. That was the era of the black and white boom, I guess. It was right then when companies like Dark Horse and First Comics in Chicago and Eclipse and Kamiko were all starting up. These small independent black and white comic companies are starting up where you could make these books relatively cheaply. The distribution system had just altered, had just shifted in comics a lot, so that it was viable to do this. You could be a little publisher and get your books distributed. Up until then, really, the big two pretty much had a pretty severe lock on getting comics into on the newsstands and grocery stores throughout the country. When all that began to change and direct distribution came in, we don't need to go into this whole history, but basically what it boils down to is that was a time when a lot of that stuff was opening up. And you're absolutely right, Dark Horse became a real lightning rod, I guess would be a way to put it, for a lot of creators to bring their personal visions, their passion projects there. And that's exactly what I did with Trekker.
All right. So where did Trekker come from as an idea? What was the basis of that?
Well, it came from a few things. The number one was when Mike Richardson, Dark Horse's publisher, approached me. He was trying to get a few established professionals to come and work for his little startup company, that nobody heard about, and all. And so the way he could sort of tempt me away from a regular gig drawing the Warlord book every month at DC was by saying, if you come and work for us, we'll pay you and you can do whatever you want. That's a sentence you don't hear, right?
Yeah.
But I heard it. And so I basically called his bluff and pitched my dream project, which and then he called my bluff and said, sounds good, do it. And my dream project was a science fiction series, because ever since I was a kid, I loved a lot of different kinds of science fiction. I discovered Flash Gordon through an old Al Williamson comic that I stumbled across on the newsstand. I picked it up because it said Flash on the cover, so I thought it was given an issue of the Flash, but it wasn't. It was quite different, and I'd never seen anything like it. And I was just transported to this lush, rich, very highly romantic world you know, spotted mushrooms and lizards scurrying around in swamps, and people with, you know, leather jackets and blasters low slung on their pants, wading through swamps and just all that. I was like, my mind was quite blown.
Yeah.
And then later I read books like Dune and you know, Star Wars and Star Trek and Aliens and Blade Runner, and all these movies were coming out throughout the 70s and 80s. So when I had a chance to do a comic book, I wanted to do a science fiction one, and there weren't very many sci-fi comics being done then. And partially because of the experience I'd had with The Bear on Earth, working with Gary Cohn, where we did a science fiction series and a strong female lead character, and I just loved that opportunity and that unique opportunity in comics. Then there weren't a lot of female-driven action adventure characters then. The Bear on Earth was much more, as you know, was much more of a sort of an Edgar Rice Burroughs-y sort of high fantasy concept of science fiction, and Trekker was much more gear, much more sci-fi western, because of things like Star Wars and Blade Runner that were a big part of my thing. Anyway, so all that stuff went into the stew to create Trekker, and I thought it's a female-driven story that isn't a surefire hit. It's a science fiction comic for a little black and white comic book company.
Right.
Unless without that sort of engraved invitation to do it, I'd never get a chance to do that, by people. So I thought, this is my one shot. I better go for it. So I just dove all in.
So how many were in black and white originally? How many issues?
Of a standalone issues, she had 6 of her own issues, 6 bi-monthly books. So it was a year that she had that run. Before that, she'd been in some issues of Dark Horse Presents. That's their anthology book, so it was 8-page chapters to serialize the story that way. So she was in a few of those. And then after those 6 issues, she was in some more Dark Horse Presents stories and a couple of standalone issues too. So it was kind of she wound up having a sort of spotty, sporadic publishing history at Dark Horse, which was what I and Dark Horse, what we can manage to do, because, like I said, it had all those marks against it as far as being something that would be a natural fit for the way comics were being done and the sort of comics that were expected those days. So it was never able to find a really big audience. It found people like Jeff who remember it very fondly.
Yeah.
But it was kind of a struggle to sustain it. So and that's why I eventually just got tired of being able to get a story out and then sort of have it disappear because people didn't know it wasn't coming out on a regular, ongoing basis. And I wanted all the stories to interconnect. I want the idea with Trekkers, each story is a cool, fun, standalone action adventure, like a great, Star Wars movie or a great, Flash Gordon comic. But when you put them all together, it tells us sort of the life journey of the character, like a big, sprawling novel like Dune does, where the scale and scope expand and grow, and the characters gain in depth and richness and all that sort of stuff over time. And doing that where you only get a little chunk of it here, and then a while later maybe catch the other chunk, that was just driving me nuts, and I'm sure it was frustrating for readers. So finally put the whole thing on hiatus for a bunch of years until I could be at a point or find a way to get back to it and not have to keep interrupting the story. And happily, that's where we are now.
Yeah, no, it's worked out great with technology. You've been kind of a leader in Patreon as an artist, as a creator. A lot of folks following you on Patreon, supporting as you've brought Trekker back. At first kind of slowly, but this really has hit fast forward with the world of Kickstarter. You're kind of one of the, I look to you as being one of the guys that has figured this out. You have got this thing figured out. You and Carl Kiesel, you know how to work Kickstarter to your advantage. And tell us a little bit, how did that start? Were you nervous at first, thinking, oh my God, I'm going to get fans to now support this up front, and then I have to deliver it on the back end?
Well, I was very nervous for not exactly that reason. I would describe it just a little bit differently, but so how it came about was Carl, my good friend Carl Kiesel, who is, as anybody who knows Carl's work knows, that not only is a great and brilliant creator, he's bursting with ideas and passion and talent. And he did a Kickstarter to return sort of a lost project of his, Section Zero, to the public. And it was a big success, and Carl ran it so well. And afterwards, he was talking with me because he knew at the time I was still trying to figure out the best way to get Trekker out on that regular, ongoing basis that I was talking about. And he said to me, Ron, I know that Kickstarter is sort of like your sort of like your last option, your last resort. But if you do decide to do that, I want to help you. I'll be your wingman, essentially. And I was already sort of thinking, it was looking more and more like Kickstarter was going to be something I was going to have to try. And I knew nothing about how to do Kickstarter, and I had no idea, what level of support I would really get and stuff. But knowing that Carl was going to sort of hold my hand through the process was definitely helped me reach that tipping point. So he really counseled me a lot and helped me craft and build my first campaign. Between that and then the main advantage I have is, as I say, I knew that I didn't know anything about Kickstarter, about how to run them. So I just did as much research as I could and talked to people and their experiences, people who were 20 or 30 years younger than me that had run several Kickstarters, people that were in much more my own sort of cohort as creators of the same sort of era and similar pedigrees. And just put together the best ideas. And when I say best ideas, I mean the ones that seemed that they might fit my own process and the way I was going about things. And then I built a campaign and I said, I still don't know what I'm doing, but I've done the best job I can of trying to make sense of it, and held my breath and hit the launch button. And that's what I was nervous about. At that time, the one thing I had going for me was I had 2 full-length Trekker stories finished and in my back pocket already, because I'd been producing the pages regularly, ongoing, with the hope and expectation that Dark Horse would find the way to put out these new trade paperbacks on something of a regular schedule. And it just became clear that their publishing needs and schedules and what I wanted for Trekker just weren't matching up. Mm-hmm. That's the only reason that I brought Trekker on to Kickstarter. Otherwise, I had no complaints about working with Dark Horse at all. They're always really supportive. We just couldn't get our, the schedules that we wanted to match up. So anyway, I hit that launch button. I wasn't worried about getting the book done because basically the book was done before I hit the launch button.
Right.
It's been that way in every campaign I've run, and I know I was very fortunate to be in that position. So my anxiety was, is anybody going to come to my site and give me money?
Sure.
I knew I had some very good, loyal Trekker fans, and I was going to get some money, but I was asking for $15,000 just to make the cover the bare costs of getting the book printed, and I had no idea. And it funded in a day and a half, so so it was pretty great.
That's got to be an affirmation of how much people love the character and want to support seeing more adventures.
I was stunned and have been from that day to this just incredibly grateful every morning that I wake up.
Yeah, well, and now, the most recent one, I got my copy November, I guess, when it came out from last summer. Great looking book. The production values are top notch. So congratulations on that one being such a huge success. I know I think it just ended when we spoke over the summer. So
right.
So it was or it was ongoing. I don't remember which, but it was done because you had the pages done, and of course it's funded in the first couple of days. That the fans show up and they support this, and it's been that way now for 3 or 4 of these Kickstarters, right?
3, yes. That one was the 3rd one, and this next one will be number 4.
And tell us about the next one, because this is definitive, right? This is a giant book, 450 plus pages.
Right.
This is a big undertaking.
Right, and having done 3 campaigns, I sort of figured, it's reasonable for me to assume I can make some pretty safe guesses for about what to anticipate for another campaign like that. But of course, that would be too easy. So I have to try something different to continue to add stress and uncertainty to my life. No, actually, this one was planned not from the beginning, but from kind of early on in the process. And that was the idea of when it got to the point where all the Dark Horse volumes that I'd put out have gone out of print now, which means that effectively, if I want to try to get a new reader to come on board to Trekker, I can't offer them any books when I'm at conventions or on my Etsy store or anything like that. You can't get them, and that's not good. That's not acceptable.
Right.
So this book, this project is to go back and get all those stories. It's a rescue mission. We're going to go back and get all those stories that are currently out of print and bring them back into print. Now, they've all been in print once or twice in different formats before. so to make it as viable as possible and to make it as cool as possible, I'm gonna go the deluxe hardcover route,
Right.
and it's gonna be all in full color. So I'm going to. It's going to be, as you say, 450 plus, probably 470 or so pages. To get all the original Trekker stories, everything that came out before I turned to Kickstarter and produced the 3 new books, which I'm able to keep in print myself. So all that early material, I'm going to put them out as a hardcover, and it's called Trekker: The Complete Journey, Volume 1. And I emphasize Volume 1 because, as I say, I've got 3 new stories that I've already done after that, and many more to come. So I want everybody to understand that this is a way to get all that earlier material. And I believe that sort of cycle of stories does a really great job of taking Mercy St. Clair from the beginning of the story and taking through a lot of journeys, and she ends up at a different place than she started. And at the same time, it's poising the readers to jump on into the next arc as well.
Right.
And I want it to work on all those levels. I'm shooting for the bleachers here. I'm going for broke.
Well, you've got a good track record so far as fan support, and I know a lot of those, like you said, they're no longer in print. I think I have the last of the Dark Horse trade collections that came out, and those earlier ones not in color, and you're going to these are going to be in color, right?
Yeah, the main selling point for people that have earlier versions of this, like Visual Aid. The first book, when I got back to doing Trekker, Dark Horse and I worked together, and he put out the Trekker Omnibus, and it was about 280 pages, as I recall, and largely, I mean, we did color the first story, but most of these stories remained in their black and white because it was the best. It was the economically feasible packaging we could do for the book. The Dark Horse omnibuses, these ones anyway, are also a little bit smaller than comic book page size and format. So this time I thought, well, I want the widescreen version, so to speak. So I've done a little mock-up.
We get to see some mock-ups. That's great. Yeah.
So this is actually the Saga book, but I taped my cover on it.
Right.
So you can get a feel for the heft of this thing, and it would be a thick book that is. See, it's a little bit bigger than the Dark Horses version, and I also went back and I took all those black and white stories, and I've just finished coloring them too, because the idea with the trade with the hardcovers is I want all the stories to have essentially the same presentation. I didn't want some, like the omnibus, a little bit smaller than the trade paperbacks, and some is in color, some is in black and white. I want this to read as much like a seamless, unified story as a whole. And I know that when I got some of these hardcover collections, like the Saga one, the pages aren't, massive in size, but they're bigger enough that the art just has, to me, so much more presence and power. And I just found the stories even that much more compelling. And especially with something like Trekker, where those early black and white stories, I worked my tail off to render them in black and white a lot because I knew I didn't have color to help me out, right? So I was just putting all sorts of textures and patterns and shadows and details, probably going obsessively over the top with it. And so having the chance to get that art a little bit larger, so it has a little bit more room to breathe and invites the reader into it more, I think it's going to make a huge difference in the experience of the book. I really do feel this is going to be the best reading experience I can possibly deliver for these stories.
I love that deluxe size approach to things. A lot of companies are going that route it's like almost a prestigious sort of presentation. I, as a fan, I really love seeing the bigger size books, the hardcovers. This is right up my alley. I'm super excited about it.
Great. And the one thing I wanted to be, I've seen and gotten a variety of hardcovers in different sizes and packagings, and I think that what I'm trying to do here is different than like some of those big the artist edition prints, which are really large. They're pretty much like original art size. Yeah. And as an artist, I do love having those. They're great to pour over and study the art. But I wanted this book to be at a size that was still really reader and user friendly. You can hold it in your hands and flip through the pages, because primarily I'm a storyteller. That's what I see my real job. I try to draw very well, but I try to draw very well because it helps me tell my story better. And when I put out a book, I'm only secondarily interested in putting out something that's sort of like a collectible artifact. I want to put out something that's a story. I want readers to read the stories, connect with the characters, and get a thrilling adventure experience out of the story. That's the main thing that I want. If along the way they say that's a great drawing and how cool it feels to hold this thing in my hands, that's all great. But that's a secondary goal in mind for me. So I didn't want it to be huge and massive, so people would have to struggle to turn the pages and be struggling with the medium. I want it to flow as smoothly and organically as reading comics has always been for me. And so I'm pretty satisfied with the format I've settled on here.
All right. So how far along in the process have you gone back and colored some of those pages, or is that yet to come? I know the Kickstarter launches next week. From the time folks are watching this interview, we're about a week away, less than a week at the point that folks are seeing this, from the launch of the Kickstarter. How much of it is ready to go to the printer as soon as you're funded, as soon as it's over?
Yeah, all the coloring is done. So if the campaign is successful, the campaign closes. It takes a little bit of time to sort of get the pages. I'm going to tweak a few more things in the color, just here and there, to make sure, because I've had to go back and color over 200 pages, and so now I need to go back and make sure that everything is consistent and coherent as I want it to be. Then the files are all loaded up and formatted in a certain program that I don't know anything about, which is why I hire a couple of people that are my production people. They used to work at places like Dark Horse, so they know how to deliver books like we were saying, that book Battlefields. That looks and feels magnificent in your hand too, I feel. And
absolutely.
And that's because I'm working with people who can speak printer language much better than I can.
Right.
There are these technical terminologies. When I say matte paper, I mean a certain thing. That's not what printers mean when they say matte paper. There's certain sort of blacks that you can use. To me, black is black, because but for printers, there's this kind of black and there's that kind of black, and there's this kind of paperweights and that kind of paperweights, and at this sort of thickness of book you want this kind of binding, all this sort of stuff. And that's more than I can really take on board and do really well, and still keep my books coming out as I want them to. So anyway, I work with a couple of people. Rhiannon and Allison have saved me so many times, and but it takes time to get the pages all formatted and stuff, so that we are confident that when we send these files off to the printer, we get back the book we've been dreaming of having.
Right.
And but it'll be off there very, very quickly. And of course, a hardcover, it takes longer to produce and turn those around than the soft covers. So with the trade books, I end the campaign, and usually within about 4 months, the books are in backers' hands. It'll probably be a few months longer than that, 2 or 3 months longer than that. But still, I'm anticipating, if things go well, that by this summer, readers are going to have a new hardcover Trekker book in their hands.
That's very exciting, man. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I know this is like a dream come true, right? From this time you started 30 years ago to see this realized, it has to make you very proud.
Well, proud and grateful. And you're right. I mean, when I first created Trekker, I'd been working in color comics, and most comics that I knew, and especially if it's action adventure comics, they tended to be in color. So I've always, I was first thinking about Trekker with that sort of treatment. Of course, the reality is where it was going to be black and white, so I worked as hard as I could, and I'm very proud of the way those black and white books turned out. At the same time, if color is used well and effectively, it doesn't get in the way of the story. It doesn't interfere with the reader's experience. It just enriches it and deepens it. So that's what I've really, really tried to do using the color here, to if anything, just make the emotional point of a scene and the overall feel of a story just that much more vivid and compelling for the reader. That's the whole game. Yeah.
I was curious if you have, because you're coloring some of these things, so much later. Is there anything is there a panel even that stood out to you that you're really excited to color, or one that came out better than you were expecting, or?
Yeah, there are several. There are several cases where, I'm not, I've never been never specialized in coloring, so it's been a learn as you go sort of thing. But luckily, I've got a few books under my belt now before I dove into this sort of massive undertaking. But I'm still at the point where I'll be discovering things as I'm coloring. Ooh, I didn't know I could get that effect, or I didn't know that would turn out that well. And sometimes the opposite happens too. Oh, I thought,
well, sure.
I haven't got there yet. So, and of course it's Trekker. So when I get one of those, when I get stumped, I just keep working at it until I come up with something that I feel gets me, like 80% of what I was after at least,
Right.
But yeah, there are some cases where I've got a page where I say, boy, just adding a little warm color in the background there just energizes this scene and just brings so much more depth or emotional resonance or just sense of that sci-fi atmosphere that I'm after in that scene. That I did the best I could to convey it in black and white, but a little pale blue back there, boom, look what that does. It just throws it right in the pocket then. So those moments were very thrilling. They were enough to compensate for the fact that I'm going over working very closely on black and white art that I had done decades ago and seeing nothing but all the terrible drawing choices.
Second guessing yourself.
The worst critics, right?
Yeah.
Artists always are. And, fortunately, since I'd already been through the process of sort of reclaiming this art once before when Dark Horse and I put out the smaller omnibus. So I'd already had to make my peace with the past that I was going to be presenting to the world all of my warts all over again. And at first, when we first talked about the omnibus, for a fleeting second, I thought, well, maybe I should take this opportunity to go back and correct some of those drawing errors. And then I said, I could spend 5 years doing that. Because once I start fixing one, finger or one hand or the way one shadow falls awkwardly across the figure, I'm going to be doing that on every single panel and on every single page, and I'll never produce the next news story. And that's what I really want to be doing. So I resisted the temptation to go back and screw around with that stuff. I figure that's sort of the public record by now. Those books have been around, and some people are very fond of them, warts and all. And I'm just going to have to let it, rise or fall on its own merits. So I resign myself to that.
And did you, as a fan of science fiction, as a fan of the genre, revisiting some of these stories from 3 decades ago, did you get lost in some of it as you were coloring it? Did you rediscover things that you had forgotten, perhaps?
Little details here or there, but by and large, the thing that surprised me the most was how little I had forgotten of those stories. Because, I want to make sure I use my words correctly here. When I do a job for, say, DC or another Dark Horse character project, I generally tend to enjoy them quite a lot, and I try to put myself into them and find my way into the characters and stuff. But when I'm working on Trekker, a series that I created from the ground up, it is such an intense creative experience, and it fires my imagination on all directions at the same time, that those stories have remained pretty vivid in my mind for all these years. It's one thing that made the re-entry to the world after I'd been away from it for about 12 years. There was a period where I didn't do any Trekker at all. I did have the next story already written out, longhand on a legal pad, sitting in a drawer saying, one day, So when I was finally ready to get back to Trekker, I brought that pad out and read through my script, and it's like all the voices and the characters and the atmosphere just came back to me. So yeah, there wasn't as much of that rediscovering of old lost friends or whatever it might be, because I kind of was expecting that, but it didn't happen. I said, oh yes, this page I remember. Yes. Oh, now I know why there needs to be a green jacket on that character, because that's who that character is, sort of. Right.
Well, it's so great to see this happening. I'm really happy for you. I think fans are super excited about this. A definitive collection of this great, almost lost, I would say, but I still have some of the originals. I know a lot of fans do, but wow, what a way to present it. The director's cut.
Yeah. And I've been very gratified about that too, because as I say, when I've done the 3 trade paperbacks, and those were, for me at the time, they felt very ambitious and very exciting, and I'm still very proud of them, and looking forward to doing the next one of those as well. But this is like a bigger bite, and in some ways on a whole larger scale. And so when I was nervous about it, when I've been at conventions recently, and some fan will come up, somebody who's maybe backed the Kickstarters in the past, and then I just sort of beta testing the idea. Maybe so my next campaign, what I'm going to do instead is this hardcore thing, just sort of to test the water and take their temperature. And pretty much universally they say, "Oh, I can't wait to get that. Yeah, I've already got the omnibus or the other issues, but I want to get this version of it." So hopefully they're all going to show up and bring all their friends.
Yeah. Well, we'll certainly do our best to get the word out there. In the meantime, thank you so much, Ron. Give us all of the information that people need to know. Where can they find you, follow you, support you, and what do they need to know about this Kickstarter coming up next week?
Okay, well, first and foremost, the Kickstarter will be at the URL that I use for all of my Kickstarters, which is trekkerkickstarter.com. I make it as simple as possible. If you type that in, boom, it should take you right to the live campaign.
Trekker with 2 Ks.
Yeah, Trekker with 2 Ks.
2 Ks.
Trekker, and then kickstarter.com. Should take you right where you need to go. That's the primary thing. In the meantime, or alternatively, you can find me on Facebook, and I'm on Twitter at Ron_Randall. I have an Etsy store, Ron Randall Art, Etsy store, Ron Randall Art. So I try to make myself as ubiquitous as I can over social media, especially over the intense course of a 30-day Kickstarter campaign, because I know that the more relentless I am, the more insufferable I am.
Got to do it.
The more eyeballs I'm likely to discover, and really that's the name of the game, to keep this thing going in a sustainable way. It's finding and building. I'm still looking to find and build that audience and tell my story to that many more readers.
Well, it's super exciting. Looking forward to the launch. We're going to be sharing it with all of our fans and all of our followers. And anything we can do to help promote it, we're going to be doing it for you, Ron. Thanks for taking some time with us this afternoon and sharing with us your excitement. I think you've gotten me more excited than I was already. So thank you for that.
Well, thanks.
Jack's even excited.
Yeah.
You got Jack excited about this.
That's great. Well, thanks, guys. All I can say about it is I certainly did not get into comics to sell comics. I just want to write. I just want to write and draw my stories. But the era that we're living in now with Kickstarter and social media, that direct connection with fans is something that it's sort of required, especially when you're trying to follow a path like mine. And what I have found out, to my pleasant surprise, is how much I enjoy it. How much if you hear enthusiasm and passion from me, it's absolutely genuine, because I love doing Trekker. And I love being able to interact with the fans in this way, much more than it was completely unforeseen. I just thought, well, I want to do Trekker, so it means I've got to do more conventions and be on social media. Right. And I found what a joy it's been to be able to, have exchanges and interactions with readers and fans, answer their questions, listen to their suggestions, whatever it is. It's been a growing thrill and enjoyment as time has gone by. It's been just fantastic. So a great ride, and thanks so much for your help and support, and to keep feeding that fire.
Well, and we'll keep looking for you out on the convention scene too. I know it's a fun place where we love it. That kind of fan interaction is just such a vital part of the world we're living in today. And I think it's a true testament that you're one of the linchpins of fandom right now, as far as the creators who are out there using the Kickstarter, using Patreon, using all of these different things. And the old cliche, if you build it, they will come. Well, you keep building it and they keep coming. So Ron, keep up the good work. Give them the Kickstarter URL one more time, just for good measure.
Okay, trekkerkickstarter.com. There you go.
Thank you so much, Ron, for taking the time out to chat with us today, and looking forward to seeing you at the next con down the road.
Thanks very much. Looking forward to see you guys as well.
Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
So that's the breakdown. We'll see you soon.